Ryan Beaupre, also having multiple day twos at DLCs, top 8 in Atlanta, and then 53rd at Dallas-Fort Worth. Typically known for Sapphire Steel, but decided to bring Blurple this time.
Yeah, this Sapphire Amethyst deck is really interesting. Like I said, it did overperform in terms of conversion to day 2, and it was a deck that a lot of people were talking down on in terms of day 1. I think people saw it show up to day 1 and thought it was a bit of a meme, but turns out it was one of the best converting decks we had here at this tournament in terms of, what showed up and what made it into day 2. So really excited to see how it faces against Ruby Amethyst. I will say that Ryan's deck is clearly built to win the Genie Mirrors, and Edmond does not have any Genies in the deck. Edmond also has 12 1-drops and is on a significantly more aggressive version.
Yeah, so I'm very eager to see what happens. Let's go down to the feature table and watch this best of 3. Also to note, Edmond, having already won a DLC in Dallas-Fort Worth, he already has his invite to Worlds. So if he wins this, that means that there's going to be a pass-down invite. It would go to Mo if Mo did not win his top 16 match, which I'm not sure if he did or not. If Ryan wins it, of course, Ryan will get that invite as well.
So in Ruby Amethyst, we often have this discussion of this Lady Tremaine, Madame Medusa split. And I would say that historically, through almost every single metagame, that split has favored more in the Madame Medusa range, usually being 3-2, 4-1, something like that. Edmond Chu, 4 Lady Tremaines, 0 Madame Medusas in this list. So significantly more powerful against something like Ruby Sapphire that drops things like Tamatoa. Also, any Sapphire decks that play cards like Tamatoa. But I'm really interested to see how that plays out. Also, of course, we talked about it already, the choice to bring no Genies to this tournament. I don't think a decision that anybody really had in their mind is a possibility in Ruby Amethyst.
No, especially from this set. Genie has been a powerhouse in Amethyst, warping a lot of what Amethyst decks have usually been doing and sort of creating this discussion on how many Genies do you play, how many Rabbits do you play, because they both fill a very similar role. Edmond choosing to go the route of playing for Merlin Rabbits, no Genies at all, actually no evasive characters at all, whereas Ryan is playing those Genies. He's also playing a couple Elsas, a lot of the things that you expect to see in Amethyst a lot more.
In combination with these 12 1-drops, Edmond also has 4 copies of the library, so we're going to see Edmond drawing a lot of cards in this match. Edmond also has access to 2 Sisu empowered Siblings. This is sort of his staple. This is the tech that he added into his deck when he came to Dallas-Fort Worth. Actually won that entire tournament. He was probably one of the only Ruby Amethyst players with 2 copies of Sisu and sort of popularized that change in the way people built Ruby Amethyst. We just see Flynn Sisu in hand for Edmond Chu, but Flynn's going to be the ink as we go into the Chernbox followers.
Notable as well, Edmond ended up sending back 6 cards during his alteration, so obviously wasn't very happy with his opening hand. This is what he was given. Also looking at Ryan's hand, we do have the turn 2 Tipo, but we also have an uninkable 8-cost Elsa, that Spirit of Winter sitting in there. So that's going to be in there for a little while unless we want to put it into the Inkwell with something like the Tipo. Also a Hades Infernal Schemer.
So Edmond, I think that on the play as Ruby Amethyst against something like Sapphire Amethyst, you probably are looking for the Flynn Sisu line, and Edmond does end up finding that. Just force the pressure and make them answer you. You cannot let Flynn Rider trigger multiple times. It is just an absolute disaster scenario, and I'm assuming that's something that Sapphire Amethyst is going to be weak against, actually, is this line specifically.
Yeah, especially because in any Sapphire deck, you're looking for that turn 2 ramp, usually in the form of something like Seal the Azurite Sea or Tipo. Of course, if you play the Tipo, he only has 1 strength. With the Diablo in play with 0 strength, that means that Flynn Rider's ability is going to trigger. It's going to gain Edmond 3 lore, so being able to get that out early, it means a lot for Edmond. There's also that Sisu in the hand that'll have as much strength as Ryan has cards in hand. So it might be particularly difficult for Ryan to get anything out on board that can match the highest strength character on Edmund's side, because you're utilizing cards like Rabbit, like Genie, some of those Amethyst cards that typically have lower strength.
So critically, Ryan does have access to the Goat here, which I think is probably one of the better cards you could have on turn 4. Assuming he has the ink, is able to ink to get up to that 4. That is going to be the answer in terms of like how do you answer Flynn C. So it's going to be the turn 3 Goat.
Yeah, and he's gonna have to play a real balance game as well. If this Sisu Emboldened Warrior enters play on Edmund's side of the board, because Goat is the highest strength character that Ryan has in play, but it only has 4 strength. So if Ryan has more than 3 cards in hand, that means this Sisu is going to more than 4 cards in hand. And this Sisu is going to continue to trigger this Flynn ability.
Okay. That was a ridiculously important draw for Ryan, by the way. Ryan has has the goat, but did not have another inkable. So if he did not find an inkable off the top there in the form of Merlin Crab, would have had to ink the goat and play the rabbit and probably immediately lose this game.
Interesting as well. Something like that Tipo on turn 2 being the form of ramp that you had, getting another card out of your hand, being on the draw, drawing an extra card means that he has exactly 3 cards in hand in this scenario, so that this Sisu Emboldened Warrior only has 4 strength, matching the strength of this Merlin Goat, turning off that Flynn.
So Edmond has a start, but Ryan has the answer. So now we're going to transition away from this sort of early game of chicken, and now we're going to go into this sort of like mid to late game. We're going to see players start to play for a more card advantage, sort of resource-based game plan.
One thing that I think is going to be super important for Ryan here is Amethyst Sapphire historically has struggled against decks that can build up a wider board. And so, one, knowing that Ryan's not going to have something like a Be Prepared or a Sisu Empowered Sibling to play because he's not playing Ruby, but also knowing that Edmond is playing Lady Tremaine and not playing the Madame Medusas, sort of a card that requires your opponent to have few characters in play. It's going to be really important for Ryan to have characters that he can banish if those Lady Tremaines start coming into play.
All right, so back over to Edmond here, heading into his 4th ink. The Flynn Sisu line has been effectively stalled at this point. Once again, Ryan sort of game life was on the line there, most likely as he went to draw that inkable card and did find the Merlin Crab off the top in order to play that goat.
Could have been sweating a little bit. We do see the Sisu interplay in a library, following it up. Going to move the Flynn to this library. Any characters at the library, if they're banished, you get to draw a card. That library, of course, also has a lore on it. Sort of teasing Ryan to challenge into this location, because one thing locations are great at, slowly building up that lore over time if they're not dealt with.
I mean, Ryan just can't even turn that Merlin go sideways because he threatens to lose it. Also, turn 5, there could be a Maui that comes down, which will outpower that goat anyway, and we could see that Flynn get triggered. So, Ryan, I don't think that Ed has the Maui right now, but there is a risk that this Flynn gets more value.
It's funny you mentioned that because, Edmond isn't playing the Genies, which is something that everybody was surprised by. He's also not playing any Mauis. Another card that is super pivotal to Ruby Amethyst. Another just interesting tech there for Edmond, bringing this Ruby Amethyst list into the NA Championship.
I can't believe I missed that when I was looking at the list. I'm so used to just being a stock 4 of. More than I'm used to Genie being a stock 4
right?
of. More than I'm used to Madame Medusa being a stock 4 of.
Do see that Genie entering play for Ryan, though. So an evasive character that Ed might have trouble dealing with. Of course, Ed is playing cards like Brawl. But outside of that, I don't think there's going to be any targeted removal for these Genies. So Ed's going to have to rely on cards like Sisu Empowered Sibling, Be Prepared, or finding a way to have Ryan choose it through Lady Tremaine to get rid of those Genies. If Ryan can keep this Genie on board for a while and allow it to quest, so long as we can sort of keep this Flynn in check, Ryan could start pulling ahead. Or he's already ahead, but pull even further ahead.
Yeah, opposite trade with the Sisu here. Ink the bell. All right, back over to Ed here. We're going to see some card draw coming out of a Ruby Amethyst player. Both players on very few cards in hand, which is not super indicative of some of these Amethyst decks, but I mean, the Flynn Sisu line is just an absolute must answer, and the game ends in the first few turns if you can't do it. And there's the rabbit to come down. Now we're going to go ahead and start drawing cards.
I think Ryan also has a rabbit or two in hand, so we'll start to see Amethyst do what Amethyst does best. Now that Sisu Emboldened Warrior is off the board, and Ryan knows that he can start to keep this Flynn in check, doesn't really have to worry about how many cards are in hand unless he's concerned of another Sisu Emboldened Warrior coming down later to get this Flynn turned back on.
And considering what to ink here. Okay, yeah, inks the friends on the other side, notably, and is going to move that rabbit over to the library as soon as possible. Flynn's probably not going to get any more value out, so we're going to go ahead and use that to trade with the Tipo.
Yeah, challenging and banishing that Tipo, giving Ryan the ability to challenge the Flynn if he wants to, but of course, if the Flynn is banished while at the library, Edmond will get a card draw off of it. I'm not sure that Ryan really wants to challenge with anything on board right now either.
Yeah. Ed's deck really showcases the power of library specifically.
Yeah, all of those one drops that banish themselves to cycle cards like Diablo, but especially Chernobog's Followers and Magic Broom. Both cards in one way or another that allow you to banish them and draw a card, either by questing or playing a character. Comboed with the library means you get to draw another.
Both players keeping hand information pretty private at this point.
Also, just taking some time to think, again, this being the top 16, Ed already has his Worlds invite, but certainly don't want to lose out of the tournament.
Yeah, Ryan's got a great draw engine set up here with the Rabbit plus the bounce cards ready to go. So.
Are going to see that Rabbit being played, drawing a card. Does have a really solid Amethyst hand with that Hades on the top end in case Edmond comes down with something big like CC Empowered Sibling.
Yeah, it is going to be pretty far away from that at this point. I think our Amethyst Sapphire player is looking to be in a pretty good spot at this point, especially if that Genie goes unanswered. We could see Ryan pivot and actually be the aggressor in this matchup, forcing Edmond to respond.
I think having access to something like that Genie in play, giving yourself the opportunity to continue to play cards on board, doing things like this, bouncing your Rabbit so you can keep cards in hand, continue to play cards to the board, makes it a little bit difficult for Edmond to get around knowing that he's not playing cards like Madame Medusa, or ways to really target specific cards on Ryan's side of the board is relying a little bit more on board wipes through Be Prepared and Sisu versus the Lady Tremaine, where you're sort of favored to keep a board a little bit wide.
Chipping away at that library, just showcasing how threatening that card is.
Gonna sing Friends on the other side here with the Rabbit for Ed, drawing 2 cards.
Magic Broom for Friends on the other side is what comes off the top.
See that Magic Broom enter the Inkwell. We are gonna brawl this Genie. The card that Ed really needed to get rid of the Genie. And we do see another Sisu in play. This is going to be tough for Ryan.
Another must answer as Ryan has drawn cards. Has to have known this was a threat as you progress that game plan of drawing cards and getting card advantage over your opponent. Another Sisu could come down, and that Flynn is not gone quite yet. We can remove the Flynn, right? But we're going to get a lot of value out of that because we're likely going to draw a card. Cannot remove the library, I don't believe, before.
Yeah, I mean, Ed is doing this very interesting thing with this deck where Ryan has been in a couple positions where I'm sure he would have loved to quest with cards like the Genie, but knowing that the library was in play, has to instead challenge it. Now that the Flynn is exerted and the Sisu is on board, Ryan has to get rid of this Sisu, has to get rid of this Flynn while it's exerted.
This is this is kind of a masterclass of like a multi-angle attack. Like, what does Ryan do here that feels good? Everything has a downside. Like, Edmond's attacking him from so many different angles. Punished him for card draw, has the Flynn ready to activate. The Flynn is exerted. You can attack into it, but Ryan doesn't have enough characters on board to remove the library forward, which is going to allow Edmond to draw another card. Almost feels like a sort of Chess-esque kind of lock that Edmond has sort of assembled on Ryan here in his early game.
Ryan able to find the line, though, with the Madame M Fox bouncing that Rabbit back to hand. With the Fox having rush, we can banish the library with the Snake and the Fox here.
But now the Flynn's going to trigger. So exactly like we talked about, he is able to sort of get the value, right? There was no winning in that scenario. You just had the path of sort of least evil there, I guess. That was an incredible setup by Ed. I mean, you really cannot overstate how masterfully that was played.
No, and it really goes to show the power of locations when used correctly, right? You set up something on your board through a character that really needs to be removed, 1 or 2 very strong and powerful threats. That way that Ryan has this difficult situation where you don't really want to use your characters to remove this location because there's something else that you have to answer as well. But as long as you continue to keep this location on board, Edmond's going to continue to move up in lore. I mean, he's already up at 13. Looks like we're questing out with the Sisu and the Flynn here, going up to 16.
And he's playing an Amethyst deck, has access to goats. I think that we have just witnessed some of the tightest play we've seen all tournament in the form of Edmond Chu here.
Yeah, notably, Edmond is only playing the goats, no white roses, but we've seen multiple times of goats coming in and closing out these games with... We talked earlier in the game about how difficult it is for Amethyst Sapphire to deal with these wide boards. Edmond has 5 characters in play right now with game on board. Ryan's going to have to remove most of them in order to stop it.
We see the power of Ruby Amethyst. The entire thesis of bringing Sapphire Amethyst to a tournament is that it does the Amethyst thing better. But what does it mean to do the Amethyst thing better? It means to play Genie first. But what if your opponent doesn't have any Genies?
Edmond said, I don't need Genie. I don't need Genie to win this game. Edmond taking a different approach to Ruby Amethyst, which is refreshing to see. You know, I feel like the community at large can sort of take these combos that we know are really good, these characters that we know are really good, and build around them. Shows the expertise that Edmond has for TCGs in this game, finding ways to make this ink combination powerful without that. Do you see the Elsa Fifth Spirit being played, exerting the Turnerbox followers, banishing the Broom for Ryan so he can draw a card. Elsa challenging that Turnerbox followers, getting one character off the board.
How does Ryan deal with this? Like, even if you're able to survive 1-2 turns here, you know that the goats are going to be in the chamber somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you have to try to keep Edmond from gaining any lore if possible, because Ryan, of course, doesn't have access to cards like Pirate's Life to push Edmond further back from those scary positions. Ryan's just going to have to figure out a way to lock Edmond's board down. Ryan is playing a couple copies of the Elsa Spirit of Winter. You know, could potentially use it to exert some characters, keep them exerted for a couple turns.
Now, going off the top would have been game, but you know, pretty much any character is going to be good enough. We're going to go up to 18 lore here for Edmond. Expecting to see this Lady Tremaine come down. To make Ryan move one character, I assume that character will be the Diablo.
Yeah, I mean, even just getting one character off of the board helps Edmond keep a character there.
Yeah, now you have to trade with my characters, and you need an additional follow-up removal response to just not lose the game on the following turn.
Yep. Of course, we do know that Ryan has that Hades in hand, but Hades costs 7 ink to play. Right now we only have 8 ink for Ryan, could go up to 9, so it doesn't leave a lot of room to play with after that. Edmond having a Flynn, be prepared, and Lady Tremaine in hand, trying to figure out what line of play he wants to go with. He is going to go with a second Flynn, forcing Ryan to banish the exerted characters, then consider using a removal on the Flynn just to stop Ed from gaining that extra lore on the next turn. Start with the Elsa the Fifth Spirit, banishing the exerted Flynn Rider. While the Snake's going to banish the Diablo, Edmond will draw a card off of that banishment.
Will it be a goat?
Don't see what Edmond found. I'm going to bounce the Snake so that we can replay the Elsa, which is going to exert the Flynn, banishing the Flynn. So now Edmond has no characters on board. Ryan finding a great line, stopping Ed from having any characters on board the next turn. Like you said, a single goat is going to do it.
Who has the bounce as well. But no, Edmond here is to be prepared. So nice 4-for-1 on the side of Edmond.
Magic Broom and a Snake with a Lady Tremaine in hand.
Ryan needs miracle answers like that every single turn from now on.
Yep. Only being at 6 ink means that Ryan has a long way to go to get back into this game. We're going to start with a Rabbit. See what we can draw off the top. Ryan's going to have to keep a full hand of cards. Find some pretty good ones at that. Are going to see a Fox, bounce the Rabbit back, draw another card. 1 ink remaining. I don't believe we've inked for the turn yet, though. Going to ink a Let It Go. I think that was a DLC Let It Go, by the way.
Promo DLC Let It Go.
Top players at the table here, of course. Going to pass it over to Edmond.
Assume we're going to see something like a Lady Tremaine plus a 1-drop here. In the form of that Broom.
We might be bouncing the Lady Tremaine with the Snake here.
Could be.
So
I
we
think
can reuse it.
The 1-drop asks a big question here. Basically, have to remove the board. You're playing Sapphire Amethyst. You don't have access to Be Prepared. Like I said, Ryan's pretty much in the scenario where he needs miracle answers every single turn here. He also needs...
Does find that Elsa, so we can exert both of these characters. They won't ready at the start of the turn, delaying the game one more.
And there's a Diablo. So can bounce that Tremaine back and play it again, getting rid of that Elsa and having an unexerted Lady Tremaine. And surely Ryan cannot answer this.
Yeah, 2 unexerted characters, or readied characters, 4 lore total on board. Can't leave more than 2 lore in play. We're going to start with the Sail the Azurite Sea. Not a great start. Just drawing a card off the top, looking for anything to help. Gonna have to play that Hades.
It's gonna be a Hades, but I don't think that that's gonna be enough. We're gonna pass back over 18 lore, 2 quests represented on board. We're gonna go ahead and turn them sideways. Edmond's gonna take game 1 in convincing fashion. You know, we had a little bit of a back and forth there. The Ruby Amethyst deck did what it was trying to do, right? Which is like, I'm gonna play my most powerful early game opener. Your deck is inherently weak to it. Do you have an answer?
Ed was on the play last game because he is 5th seed, higher seed than Ryan, but of course, Ryan, having lost that last game, he will get the option of choosing if he wants to be on the play. I assume that will be a yes.
It is much more powerful to be on the play against any sort of ramp deck. Also, Ruby Amethyst, like that opener that we saw Ed execute, that is you can do that play on the draw. It is much more powerful on the play because your opponent's an entire turn behind in terms of their answers, and every single turn they're behind is at least 3 lore in your favor, which is an incredible amount of lore to get in the early game.
Yeah, we talked about how you can shape your hands in the beginning. I'm interested to see if Ryan finds his ideal opener. We're going to start with the Chernobog's followers, moving on to Ed, where Ed inks a Diablo and finds the magic broom.
All right, so 1 drops for each of our players here.
Ryan hopefully having that 2 ink ramp. I'm going to start by questing with the Chernobog's followers, looking, banishing, so we can look at the top card of the deck. So we think we may not have it.
Ed has Flynn Sisu again.
Okay, we do have Sail the Azurite Sea, so we're able to draw a card and ink another card for turn. We inked 1 Elsa the 5th Spirit. I think Ryan only playing 3 of those. We're going to ink a Snake, play a Diablo before we pass the turn.
Nice curve out here from Ryan. We'll see what Ed's turn 2, turn 3 is going to look like. Is it going to be that Flynn Sisu? Are we going to ask that question? Is that question just hard enough to answer that you ask it both on the play and the draw?
Could be. Something that I'm wondering is if you're Ed, think about what Ryan's trying to do on the play. On this turn 4, could play something like a Goat, could also be looking to play something like a Genie, but if so, I think Ed would want access to something like a Brawl to immediately answer it. Does look like we're going to see the Flynn come down for Ed. Maybe forcing Brian to play something like a Goat if he has it. He does have the Merlin Goat.
It also forces you to play the Goat, which is maybe not your optimal turn 4. Maybe you'd rather be playing something like a Genie. Maybe you would rather be playing something like a Rabbit. What this line does is it effectively removes that decision. Okay, we have access to the Madam Mim Fox as well, which is a similar role to the Goat.
Yep, another 4-strength character, and with this sequence, we're able to bounce the Diablo after questing with it and replay it after the Fox brings it back to hand.
Interesting, because this play will put pressure on Ryan to actually remove cards from his hand and not have too many.
We do see the Sisu Bolden Warrior interplay, which means that for every card in Ryan's hand, Sisu gets an extra strength, boosting the likelihood that that Flynn trigger happens.
Sisu is opting to friends on the other side here. Very interesting interaction between the Flynn Sisu and then the friends on the other side, like the opportunity cost of not being able to play that potentially as like your clearly optimal play. I
feel like
Madam and Fox.
I feel like Ryan would really want an Elsa the 5th Spirit in this scenario.
Oh, yeah.
You could ink, exert the Flynn, and just take care of it now. Not really have to worry about how many cards are in your hand. We have the Elsa Spirit of Winter, but not the 5th Spirit. We're going to just go ahead and play the Goat here.
I think it's a reasonable statement to say that he was probably looking for that off the top there. He's going to go down to 3 cards in hand, so has played this super well in terms of avoiding that Flynn. Actually, even lower because we have the 1-drop Chernobog's followers. So
yeah, just going wide here for Ryan, trying to push a lead.
While Ryan does have the answer, Ed has put Ryan in a place where he had pretty much no option to play it differently than that.
We're going to see Flynn trade with the Fox here. Ed recognizing that the Flynn's not going to gain a ton of value with the way that Ryan is playing.
Assume Ed would have liked to have found a library there as well, potentially.
Yeah, helping Ed recycle those cards.
Library would have been crazy to take that Flynn and trade it out.
Yeah, have
and
it
actually
replace
get a bunch
itself.
of value off of it. Yeah.
While also putting Ryan in a position where now he potentially has to answer what Edmond is presenting on board instead of continuing to push an advantage. We're going to see Ryan exert the quest with the Chernobog's followers, using its ability to banish itself and draw a card. Depot entering the inkwell. Now we're up to 6 ink. There's the Elsa, the 5th Spirit. A little bit late, but Ryan will take it, exerting that rabbit, challenging it with the Merlin goat so that Edmond can't do any bounce shenanigans and draw some extra cards. Elsa also having evasive, so now that she's sort of done her job, she can pretty safely quest against Edmond unless he wants to use something like a brawl against it.
There's that library.
Notably, we do have 2 Be Prepareds in hand as well. Couple turns off, but might be difficult for Ryan to navigate once we get up to that 7 ink for Ed. A real balance of being wide enough to answer whatever Ed's playing, but narrow enough that you don't lose if a Be Prepared is played.
Once these Elsas come down, it's going to be pretty tough for Ed to deal with. There's the shift.
Do see Elsa shifted on top of the 5th Spirit, Spirit of Winter, exerting 2 characters on Edmund's side of the board. They can't ready at the start of his turn.
Now we see Sapphire Amethyst definitely executing its game plan, showing its power against other Amethyst decks here.
Yeah, now that Elsa's in play, she quests for 3, could potentially bounce her back to hand if Ryan wanted to. Couldn't replay her, but would have her available to continue to put Ed in a lock, though. It is going to play this Lady Tremaine, force Ryan to banish the goat or the Elsa. Of course, Ryan chooses the goat here. He'll gain a lore when it leaves play. Ryan has access to a Merlin Rabbit we could play. Drawing a card, sort of insulating against something like a Be Prepared on the next turn.
It's interesting to have the Genie and know your opponent doesn't have the Madame Medusas and instead has the Lady Tremaine. Obviously knows that there could be a brawl in hand. Like Ed's hands looked a little bit clunky over the past 2 turns, so I actually feel like a brawl is pretty likely.
Quest for 3 here for Ryan, putting him up to 13. Getting closer and closer to that danger zone for Amethyst. Have a Diablo to play. Bounce it back with the Fox. We're going to we'll replay the Diablo here just so that we can get the Fox into play. Using the Fox to banish the Merlin Rabbit. It'll draw a card when that is banished as well. Moving it back to Edmond. We are at 6 ink for Ed, so if he wanted, do have access to inking, playing one of those 2 Be Prepareds in hand.
Yeah, I mean, notably can't really deal with the Elsa in the current board state, I guess. Could trade into it potentially, but it would just be... That'd be 6, so we could trade both characters. I think it's 2 cards in hand for Ryan, by the way, not 1. Could be wrong.
Yeah, it also has access to a Merlin Fox. Could use it to use one of his characters. Oh, can we take out the Elsa? Yeah, we can take the Elsa out with Fox if we bounce something.
Ed does have the brawl in hand, by the way. So we're going to quest for 2. This does tell us probably a Be Prepared coming down. Take that Diablo, and here's the Be Prep.
There's that Be Prepared, banishing all characters on the board, resetting the board state.
Kind of a 3 for 3. I think Ryan feels pretty good about that, already sitting at 13 lore. And we're likely to see the Merlin Rabbit come down, start executing this card advantage game plan. Double Genie in hand. Ryan has to expect that those Genies will meet one brawl, at least on the other side, but that's totally fine. Might be forced to brawl this Merlin Rabbit as well, but I assume that Edmond will probably hold it back.
It's been very interesting over the course of this weekend to watch the difference between rabbits and brawls being played for this reason specifically. Had Ryan played out this Genie, you get the card off the Genie, but if it gets brawled, you don't get anything, versus the rabbit. At the very least, if they brawl the rabbit, you get 2 cards instead of 1.
I think we're going to see a rabbit plus a Genie here for Ryan on this turn as we head into 8 ink.
There's a rabbit. We found a Friends. We could sing the Friends.
I think we're going to do that first, potentially. Maybe we're just going to quest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he's trying to push his...
Yeah, I think that's the way to go.
Push his lore to as close to 20 as he can with his crab, just getting that 1 extra lore. An ink for the turn, play a Chernobog's Followers. That's what we're going to do.
Yep, Ryan is the aggressor here.
Library is a great card, not particularly great at challenging characters, though.
Also, not particularly threatening.
It's going to see another Be Prepared. One good thing about locations is they aren't hit by Be Prepared, so that library will stay around, slowly ticking up 1 lore per turn. As you mentioned, Ryan understanding, I think, that he's the aggressor. Needing to close out the game. We're going to start with the Sail the Azurite Sea, draw a card. Lets Ryan ink an extra time this turn if he wants to. Has a fair amount of cards in hand, especially ones that draw him cards. Holding this genie, I think it's going to come into play.
Chooses not to ink, by the way. Or still can do it later, but chose not to ink before. The Tipo coming down. Are we going to see a card inked from hand?
Insulating against a potential Lady Tremaine.
So he's just going to ink the other Celias, right? See, I mean, this is threatening in and of itself. Going up to 17, that would be Goat Bounce. Goat has the snake in hand. That's only 10 ink required for that player. So finds Goat off the top. It's a threatening game here.
Yeah, if we have an inkable card.
Was that a brawl off the top for Edmond?
That was, I think, a brawl for the genie.
Obviously a timely brawl, but probably too little too late.
Yeah, Ryan's doing a great job of keeping the pressure on for Edmond here, forcing him to respond. We see the other genie being played. Ryan drawing a card, finding a Hades. Infernal Schemer. We still have that Prince on the other side. We're going to play it, draw 2 cards. We find a Tipo. There's the Goat.
Yep. So just play out the Tipo now, and then you have the Goat win next turn. And that's going to be a lock here for Ryan.
Ryan going up to 15, I believe, with this Tipo quest. Edmond needs to do something about this board state. Starting with a rabbit means he probably doesn't have it in hand. Using the fox to bounce the rabbit, draw another card. Now he can at least banish the Tipo, but that's going to leave 3 lore on board for Ryan.
Takes us up to 17, then a 10 ink play. Goat. Madam M Snake, Goat.
Do we have the other ink? Well, we do through Let It Go. So I think Ryan can do it on this next turn.
I think we're going to see that executed right now.
Oh, he found a second Goat too.
Not necessary, but
not necessary.
We'll cement this win.
Ryan's going to quest up to 17. We see the Goat being played. Bounce Goat. Ryan takes game 2. We're going to a game 3.
Yeah, another game 3. And now this is going to be Ruby Amethyst on the play. I wonder if Edmond's going to be able to find the Flynn plus the Sisu.
All right, so Edmond will be on the play here.
All right, I see Goat in hand. I believe there's some Ruby cards, one of which does look to be Brawl.
Still altering their hand, I'm sure.
Kept pretty quickly makes me think that one of those is actually going to be a Flynn.
Yeah, Ed has to be looking for that Flynn Sisu line. Brawl.
Edmond keeps the... Oh, he's sending it back. Okay, so yeah, so the keep here is going to be the Rabbit plus the 1-drop. So it doesn't have Flynn Sisu, but could find it off the top here in terms of those 5. Somewhat unlikely. So maybe Ed not finding as good of an opening hand quite yet as he has in the previous matches.
Ryan only has 3 cards in hand or 2. I missed how many cards he's put on the table.
Does look like 5.
4.
Oh, okay. We'll see it here.
1, 2.
Yep, 3, 4. You're correct. So just keep 3 there. A bunch of 1-drops coming off. Do you see the Genie? Yes, I believe have a Tipo in hand.
Very vital for any Sapphire deck to have that turn 2 ramp.
I mean, what do you think if you're Ryan? You're like, oh, I either need a 1-drop and I need my turn 3 to be a Modem Fox.
Yeah.
Or I need the Goat because I need to be able to answer this Flynn Sisu line.
And in all honesty, I wonder if I have to see if Ryan's even playing the... Yeah, Ryan is playing Madam M Snake. It makes me wonder if how important that turn 2 ramp is in this matchup specifically. If we see Edmond play the Flynn on turn 2, you know, instead of playing a Tipo, you try and bounce your 1 cost with Snake so that you don't get that free Flynn trigger off of the Tipo and then follow it up with something like a Fox. But that puts you so far behind, only having, you know, 1 character on board for every turn makes it difficult to really interact with anything that Edmond's doing. But at least stops that lore the trigger for Flynn.
All right, here we go. Game 3. Ryan, World's Invitation on the line. Leading up for the Magic Broom here for Edmond.
Pass it back to Ryan. He's going to ink the Magic Broom. Play a Chernobog's Follower, setting up a 2 strength character in case we see that Flynn come down on the next turn. Does Edmond have it?
I don't think so.
He doesn't. Just passes back to Ryan. Ryan's got to be happy to see that. Now Ryan has the freedom to lean into a ramp strategy for something like Tipo or Sail.
Yeah, well, he's got that turn 3 Genie as well. I mean, Ed did ship back the Brawl too. So maybe he doesn't have an answer.
Are going to see that Tipo being played, so Ryan gets to put another card from his hand into his Inkwell, face down and exerted. Be an inkable or uninkable card. Go back to Ed. We see a magic broom entering the inkwell. We're going to see Adam and Fox being played to bounce this broom. No character to rush into, though.
It's like rabbit off the top, rabbit, goat, friends on the other side, Madam and Fox in hand, and a genie.
Ryan going to go ahead and quest with his Trunderbox followers, drawing a card from the top. Before we make any decisions, like inking or playing cards, in case that top card is vital.
Interesting ink decision here for Ryan. Goes ahead and inks the Merlin goat. We're going to be playing another goat off the back of that, up to 2 lore.
We move to Ed. We see he finds a rabbit. We're going to sing friends on the other side with Fox first. Finally finding that Flynn. Maybe a little late.
Yeah, definitely a bit late with Merlin goat already on the field here. Flynn
Yeah, we're going to see that
super
Flynn.
Powerful combo, but really has to come down on that turn 2, turn 3 to be very impactful.
See Edmond recognizing that the Flynn game plan is no longer viable, putting him in the inkwell. Ryan's also going to sing friends to start his turn.
Yeah, I mean, Ryan's deck is just a better late game control deck, I think, than Edmond. Especially Edmond having all the 1-drops. Edmond does want to get that early pressure.
Great crab here being played, boosting up the Tipo. Tipo typically sort of does his job once he's played, and after that, not much you can do with him, but the combo of crab lets him trade with the Madam and Fox here, getting even more value from this Tipo and developing Merlin crab. We're going to see Edmond do the same thing with his Merlin rabbit. Merlin crab comes down, boosting the rabbit, banishing that Merlin goat.
Yeah, definitely a more winning value trade for Ryan than Edmond on that one, in terms of effectiveness of Merlin crab.
Both players have plenty of cards in hand and available to them. Ryan does have Elsa Spirit of Winter in hand. Do we have a 5th Spirit we could shift it on? I don't think so. There might be 2 Spirit of Winters in there.
I think notably Ryan has access to the Madam and Fox with the crab sitting on board, so is really not scared of locations right now. I was looking at that library, and we've seen the power of library in the previous games, but I don't think it could be impactful on this board due to the condition of Ryan's hand.
Yeah, so long as we have... Oh yeah, I guess you're right. With crab already on board, we can challenge with crab and then bounce.
Well,
so we only need those 2.
Yeah, I mean, the way the interaction works, if you bounce the crab itself too, I mean, you can just get 7, but...
Library having 8, you usually need 8 willpower, you usually need the extra strength, but crab on board doesn't really matter too much. We are going to see Edmond singing friends on the other side with crab here. Does find a brawl for any potential genies that come out for Ryan.
I think Ryan's very comfortable in this scenario.
I think
Being sort of on parity in lore, pulling ahead in card advantage. Like, you've got top-end Elsa in your deck. That's not really something that Edmond can effectively deal with.
Yeah, there's been a lot of trading back and forth between both of these players as well, but I'm sure Ryan is happy to have not seen that Flynn opening. I think that's probably the scariest thing he was looking for. Now he knows that he can at least challenge some of that. Do you see the Hades Infernal Schemer come down, putting that Lady Tremaine into Edmond's inkwell, meaning he no longer access to that one. Of course, we know Ed's playing 4 of them, and he has another in hand.
Notably, speaking of 4s, Ed also has access to 4 Be Prepareds, which is pretty atypical in the modern Ruby Amethyst list. You see them sort of cut back the hedge against some of the other matchups, but that could be, somewhat impactful and important as these Elsa start to hit the field for Ryan.
Lady Tremaine being played again after these crabs trade. Hades will be banished. And then Ed's going to immediately bounce the Lady Tremaine back to hand with Madam M Snake and pass back to Ryan here.
All right, Merlin Rabbit shuffled to the front here. We're going to go ahead and draw another card. We do have plenty of bounce package in the hand here for Ryan. We're getting up to those critically high ink levels. We're going to be able to deploy those super powerful cards like Elsa. Bounce that back, draw another card. I mean, this is a sequence of turns and sequence of actions that most players that have played against Ruby Amethyst players or any Amethyst decks are very used to at this point. Is the draw engine of these decks is to bounce those Merlin Rabbits back and forth.
Oftentimes in past sets, it's been said the Amethyst player that got the most rabbit bounces ended up winning the game. We can see why here. Do see a Sisu Emboldened Warrior being played along with the Diablo. Ed starting to build a pretty wide board, something that Ryan has to be careful about.
Something Sapphire Amethyst doesn't deal well with is wide boards. It doesn't have access to that Be Prepared, that board wipe. Elsa comes off the top here, 5-drop Elsa.
can use this Elsa the Fifth Spirit to exert one of Ed's characters that we might want to challenge instead of the snake and set up for that shift on the next turn.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's a way to play the Elsa, exert the Sisu, get enough cards out of hand so you can run the Madam and Fox into that Sisu and not trade.
And still survive. We have 5 cards in hand, so I think it's doable. Question is if you want to get rid of all those cards in your hand. Ryan taking some time to really think out this next turn. Again, with the World's Invite being on the line, no room for mistakes.
8 ink available for Ryan here.
Have access to another Madam M Fox as well if we want to play our characters, bounce them. Merlin Rabbit we could use to draw some extra cards. Had to guess Ryan's probably trying to figure out a way that he can most effectively get rid of characters on Ed's board, keeping it pretty narrow. Don't want that to get out of hand as the Amethyst Sapphire player. You don't have access to cards like Sisu, Empowered Sibling, or Be Prepared to wipe a board, reset the game. Going to see the crab come down. Great crab usage for Ryan here, boosting that Diablo up with Challenger 3, able to trade with the snake and let Ryan draw a card in the process. See if we find an Elsa come down. We'll see the Fifth Spirit being played. We're going to exert this Sisu, trade with our Madam M Fox, get some of that lore off the board. Also makes it so you don't have to be too concerned about how many cards are in your hand.
Yeah, so I don't think there was a way. I mean, with the draw, so, I mean, even if you had inked another card, it just would have maybe taken agency away from Ryan.
Right.
If he had sequenced it a different way to try to trade with that in a favorable way.
It's going to pass the turn to Ed. Draw for turn is a Madam M Snake. Pretty good card for Ed here with our Lady Tremaines and Rabbits. Goats available to us as well. We'll see that Madam M Snake. Bounce the Rabbit. Let Ed draw an extra card. Find a Turnbox Followers off the top. Something Ryan has done a pretty good job of this game is keeping at least 2 characters on board at all times. Kind of do his best to avoid those Lady Tremaine plays against the characters he'd like to keep on board. You can set up an Elsa Spirit of Winter shift on the next turn. This Elsa Fifth Spirit in play would only cost 6 ink. We'd have 3 ink available to us after that. Maximizing what we can do with our hand.
Yeah, I think one of the more impactful things to consider at this point is just the access to 4 Be Prepared in Edmond's deck. Something that Ryan's going to be thinking about. And the library does hit the field here. We have Crab on board. I do think we have a Madam and Fox in hand.
Very interesting for Ed here. You know, playing the library, maybe thinking about the play line if Ryan is playing a large character like Hades or shifting this Elsa, saying, you know, I might have a Be Prepared, and if I do, this library is going to stick around. Might be difficult for you to get rid of. Do have the Crab with the Fox combo, though, if we wanted to banish the library. Could be Edmond just asking Ryan if he has it. If he doesn't, then he has to consider playing around a potential Be Prepared with this location in play.
Yeah, I think Edmond is in a pretty tough spot here. This is just not the stage of the game you want to go to against Sapphire Amethyst. Although the board does look relatively a parity and probably card draw is relatively a parity, Sapphire Amethyst is going to excel a lot more in this late game.
Yeah, I think Ryan has to be especially careful about what he's willing to sacrifice, playing around some of those banishing cards like Be Prepared and like Lady Tremaine. Because you can lock down your opponent's board, but if they play that Be Prepared and that Elsa goes away, you know, Ryan has 3 in the deck available to him, but if Amethyst Sapphire can get to an ink total where you can sort of chain these Spirit of Winters, playing one and then bouncing one back to hand, keeping it safe, get kind of dangerous. We are going to see the Elsa Spirit of Winter come into play, exerting the Rabbit and Snake, who won't be able to ready on the next turn. Ryan
And questing with that Elsa, I believe, as well. So going up to 8 here for Ryan, or up to 9, sorry.
Yeah, Ryan trying to push his lead. There's been so much trading back and forth between both players. They just haven't had the opportunity to progress the win condition too much. Understanding how vital it is to keep control of the board. I think we're going to see Rabbit and Snake moving to the library here. So if they're banished, Ed gets to draw a card.
Be prepared. That's big for Ed. Ed's going to get so many cards off that. That was a huge value play.
3 total cards after that be prepared from the Rabbit and Snake both being at the library, and then an extra card from the Rabbit being banished. Removing.
Huge punish for not removing that library off the back of the Be Prepared.
Going to see Ryan start with a Merlin Rabbit, finding a Genie after that. Still have 4 ink available to us, can go up to 5.
Wait, now this library is hard to deal with the Merlin Crab no longer available.
Going to ink an Elsa Fifth Spirit, play an Elsa Fifth Spirit to exert and banish this Chernobog's followers. Before we pass the turn, that library is going to gain a lore at the start of Edmond's turn. Every turn this library goes unanswered, it's going to push Ed further. Sisu, a big card coming in.
A card that Edmond is known for in Ruby Amethyst. Sisu, Empowered Sibling, comes down and 2-for-1's the board.
Followed up by another library.
Oh, is Edmond finding a way to run away with this game? How is Ryan going to deal with this?
This is going to be tough. We do have the Hades to get rid of the Sisu here, but I don't think Ryan has cards available.
16
is that a Fox? He does have a Fox in hand, but he needs one of his characters to survive a turn.
16 willpower represented there that he has to get rid of. That's so much to deal with. I mean, these things are just going to take up in this sort of hyper-control late game.
Yeah, even with this Hades in play, if we bounce it with Fox on the next turn and rush it in,
Lady
it's
Tremaine,
not going to be enough. Oh, and Lady Tremaine's going to take out the Hades as well.
And we talked about Ryan doing so well to keep multiple characters on board before this, but actually keeps one with just the Hades, and now we're moving both characters to these libraries. He's going to be taking up turn by turn, threatening more draws. I think that Edmond here is starting to pull ahead. How is Ryan going to answer this? You know, had a chance to actually clear that library before, and now the game is just flipped on its head, and Edmond is looking very dominant in this position.
Going to see Ryan play both a Merlin Goat and a Genie in this turn. He'll gain a lore from the Goat, draw a card from the Genie.
See another big Sisu in hand for Edmond. We know that Ryan can't deal with wide board states well.
Ryan does find a Let It Go, could potentially use it on this Lady Tremaine, getting it out of play for Ed if Ed doesn't bounce it this turn. Both players having tons of ink in their inkwell to play with. Ed's going to start with a Rabbit, draw a card. There's a Friends.
So 12 ink here, and then there's going to be the Sisu again. It's going to hit that Genie. Now we're going to turn everything sideways. Ed is pivoting to the beatdown in this matchup. Brian, you have to answer this right. We have 4 characters on board, 2 locations. What can your Sapphire Amethyst deck do? Your World's Invite is on the line, and it looks like it's slipping away.
Yeah, we've talked about how difficult it is for these Amethyst Sapphire decks to deal with wide boards, and Edmond has a ginormous board, 16 willpower between the 2 locations, 4 characters in play. Ryan does not have very many cards in hand. He has plenty of ink. I think
heads in hand, Ryan realizes the position that he's in right now.
Ryan does have access to a Let It Go we could use to put one of these characters into the inkwell. Notable that if we put one of the characters from the library in the inkwell, Ed does not get a card draw because the library is only when a character is banished. Also has access to a Madame M Fox in hand, so potentially challenge one of the libraries with this Goat here, bounce a Fox, then use that to banish the other Goat. We don't want to use the Let It Go on the Lady Tremaine.
Man, just has to dump so many resources to clear these libraries. 8 willpower is such a beatdown, these Amethyst Mirrors. I'm just going to go ahead and run into that library. Here we go to see the Madame M Fox come down, bounce the Goat back, hit the library again, I'm sure, to remove it. And how much lore are we threatening on the next turn? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lore being threatened here by Ed at the very least. I guess we can Let It Go here to reduce some of that. Got 1 drop, and then there's going to be the Let It Go on the empowered sibling, which is a good play. The board has been somewhat sustained.
This is tough for Ryan because total of 5 lore on board that we can go up to, and then the Goat, of course, when removed, is going to gain a lore.
You see Ed knows the path to victory. Everything immediately goes sideways, and there's that
There's
be
the
prepared.
be prepared. The GOAT is going to gain the final lore for Ed. Ed's going to move on to top 8.
Awesome match. Great to see Sapphire Amethyst show up to the tournament and do well, but I think that Edmond Chu is unfortunately just not only one of the best deck builders in the game, but is actually just one of the best players in the game. Really impressed with his game.